Then for our first keynote, Joseph, welcome.
Thank you.
And I don't think anyone knows this, but you are actually also part of this community from a very early stage. So we found something that on exactly the 25th of April, 2023, you sent someone over organizing and you tipped them about this initiative.
I did. They were really excited. We were coming off KubeCon Amsterdam, and they were excited about, hey, we want to do a Kubernetes Community Day, and I had already seen the issue on CNCF, so I pointed in that direction, and little did I expect that this event would be happening so fast and with such, great participation.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you came all the way from the US for this. So
yes.
Thank you. So a little bit introduction, and I'm going to leave you to your talk. So Joseph is actually part of the CNCF End User Technical Advisory Board. So pretty cool to have someone from it here. I don't think that we will have it anytime soon after this. And you're going to have a pretty interesting announcement for us too, right?
I will. I'll share that right in the talk as well.
Thank you. Then I'm not going to hold you up any longer.
Thank you. All right. This is really exciting. I think I was at the first KubeCon, and I can honestly say this is probably just about the same amount of people that were at KubeCon San Francisco when it first happened. So this is something you should be very proud of. I am really excited to be here. It's going to be a great event today. And just to kind of give you a little background about myself, and I've been very lucky to be able to be connected with the community here for the last couple years. One, I work for Adobe, and I work for this great team that I get a chance to really work with Kubernetes, the underlying cluster management, a lot of our traffic engineering, like what we do with our Envoy and Ingress, as well as our API gateways. So, I get to see quite a bit, and I get to see a lot of different use cases, and it really gives me a chance to, really have that, end user empathy. And previous to this, and this is just focused on my Kubernetes career, I had another role at another company called Lithium. It's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit earlier about my first journey into this community and Kubernetes in itself. And I think I can honestly say I was fired for recommending Kubernetes at this company, but look how it played out. Like an opportunity now to be in front of all these people, watching the solutions that it's solving. So I feel very proud about that. And outside of that, I live up in Northern California. I'm generally up in the mountains, and I love to get out and hike, spend time with my dogs. I'm a former rugby player, probably not as in shape as like I used to be, but I still love rugby. I was out here last year watching Romania in the World Cup, excited to see the representation. So really, really love being able to be a part of this event and being a part of this community. And as far as we were talking about a little bit earlier, I've been pretty active lately with the CNCF, but a lot of my start came from SIG Release. SIG Release is the group that really cuts the Kubernetes releases. So if you really want to know really how that sausage is made, well, join SIG Release. It's a great group. I'm still a release manager associate. I haven't been able to do as much there because I've been taking on other roles. Hopefully I'll get a chance again to be a part of it. But I would say if you're looking for a great entry point, the release team is a great opportunity to get involved. And as well as I was mentioned earlier, I am part of the new inaugural CNCF End User Technical Advisory Board. We're going to be really being that vocal that area where you can come as an end user, really find reference architectures, really understand the health of projects. It's going to help to be able to help end users because we know how the landscape is. Things are changing. It's very dynamic, and it could be overwhelming. So hopefully the End User Technical Advisory Board is going to be that representation that's going to help there. So I'm really excited to see the artifacts that we're going to produce over the next year. And there's one other announcement that we were just alluding to. I'm going to be your KubeCon co-chair for Salt Lake City, London, and Atlanta. So expect to see a bit more of me at this event. Thank you. I'm an individual where sometimes I still feel like I'm an imposter, like what am I doing over here? And I really lean on my community to really help me. So please, if you have any feedback, any ideas, things you think should be highlighted, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to make sure that we make this an event where it's very inclusive and very open to all the stories that are out there in this community. But in this morning in the keynote, what I wanted to do is really I wanted to focus on a time period that I think is very relevant to us today. It's interesting now that we're going into this interesting time period, coming off this amazing event. If you're at KubeCon Paris, it was overwhelming. And the one thing that is apparent is Europe has this tremendous energy with open source and Kubernetes, and it was seen there. We had the largest event. Like, it was overwhelming. The US is still kind of in this interesting post-COVID recovery. We haven't had that same event that San Diego was. But, it's great to see, because I think it's a nice sign of the health of this project. And now we're coming on 10 years of Kubernetes. And it's exciting to just see the growth, and those stats that we have here, those are from last year's Journey report. The one that's coming out here in another month is gonna surpass this, but it's remarkable to think about these stats, the growth over this last decade. And one note about that image here, I don't know if anybody's creative here, and I know I work for Adobe, and I wish I was a little bit more creative, but if you are creative, you got probably like 3-4 more days. They're looking for a logo for the 10 years, happy birthday to Kubernetes, which is gonna be used across all events globally. So if you are creatively inclined or have something novel that you wanna put in there, I would say you still got a chance to enter that contest. But one thing I was gonna say is, Romania has played a key part in the Kubernetes journey as well. This is actually like 2-year stats that I was looking at, and if you go back like 5 to 10 years, like there's been a consistency of contributions from Romania, which is great to see, and the core project as well as many other CNCF projects. So there is a healthy community here that is out there active and contributing. And so it's exciting to kind of see that, like the part that Romania has played in there. But I was kind of curious, and I just want to do a kind of an informal poll. I wanted to kind of see like the makeup of this audience, and you can raise your hand, you can thumb me up, but I won't go through every year, but I'm just kind of curious, like from this community and this audience today, from 2020 to 2024, was that when you first discovered Kubernetes? So if anybody's from 2020 to 2024 and you came to this community, raise your hand. I'd love to see it. All right, these are my people, because I love the newer ones coming into this community. Now let's go back. Let's see if we can find some of these individuals who've been around. Let's see that we identify some of these veterans. What about from 2017 to 2019? All right, there's a lot. All right. So there's some that have been through this journey a bit. Now, let's get to the real old timers. 2015, 2016. All right, there's a couple here. I'm gonna put my hand up there as well. These are the ones that are battle scars. These are the ones who've been around and really seen it all. But it's exciting to kind of see that we're still got this healthy kind of trajectory of individuals that are coming on board and becoming a part of this community. And so in this morning, what I really wanted to cover real quickly is just kind of a little bit about the community today, as well as like looking back in the past, because I always have this, coming from I'm from an area where, I'm in America, I'm Native American, and part of my journey is that we always have this respect for elders, we love storytellers, we love history, because we feel like there's a lot behind it that can teach us in the future. And this morning I really want to kind of cover that quickly, and what I want to go back to is a time period in 2014 and 2015, this origin story, because it was really interesting time period. I was in San Francisco at this time, and so much happened at that time. And this is when there really wasn't this Kubernetes community. Like there was a lot of energy, and I think a lot of us kind of remember this dropping. I think it was in 2013, announced at PyCon, and I think when I first heard about it, I wasn't at that event, but it got around fast. It was amazing to see how this thing just spread like wildfire. Like Docker really took off. A lot of us were just hacking, trying to figure out like, how do I like, make use of this kind of new artifact? And myself and my team, when I was at Lithium at that time, we were kind of the same way. And little did I didn't know, but I kind of like now realize it when I look at this logo, because one thing is there's the containers, but I never really thought about this whale guy underneath. Like, what did that guy mean? But then I started to understand it when we started to kind of realize like, wait a minute, we can replicate development environments. We can actually build pipelines that we can ship with Docker and be able to easily kind of create this ecosystem of like letting our developers ship features faster. But then it kind of came up to a problem like this for me, which is kind of hard to see, but really this is just a view of the stars. And I live up in Northern California, and one thing up there is you will see all the stars in the mountains. And I started really thinking like, wait a minute, how are we gonna manage all this chaos of containers? Like, we're in public, private clouds, and how are you going to find those needles in the haystack? It reminded me of like all the stars. Like, how are you going to orchestrate this thing? And I think a lot of other people also had that same kind of like thinking as well. What they were kind of thinking is just like, you know, this event here is where a lot of it started to manifest itself. A lot of other people were thinking about orchestration, and you were seeing things come out and being announced at this event. It was also interesting to kind of see that many companies were jumping on board. Red Hat was going to like rebasing OpenShift to Kubernetes. I met the Deis team, and they were going to do the same thing. And you were just seeing all this energy, but there was a lot of orchestration tooling announced at this event. Someone made this comment at that time that DockerCon, it felt like everybody at that event who was a vendor was shipping some type of orchestration tool to ship a container. Like if you couldn't bump into one company that wasn't trying to solve this problem. And for myself though, there was something that stood out to me at this event when I saw this announcement made like a day later. It was on the Tuesday. It was kind of just very subtle, and there was some talks given there, but it was like the first time that I saw Kubernetes kind of announced. I still wasn't sure what exactly it was or what it was gonna give me, but it was enough to where I was like telling my team like, hey, we should take a look at this. Like, what is this Kubernetes? I know Google has shipped, with Borg and Omega had shipped containers, but I still didn't fully grok what exactly this was. And I think it's kind of funny because I'm not sure about that, the pronunciation of Kubernetes or whatever that is there, but it was interesting because we were struggling with like, what is the name of this thing? And I think it's still kind of funny, but it was enough to where we got excited and you started to see community form. Like there started to be so many incremental like meetups and events. And even though I was in San Francisco, I was watching events pop up in Seattle. And all of a sudden I started seeing on the East Coast and seeing other people contribute from other areas. And you could tell that there was something happening here behind this open source product. It was enough so that one of my team members who worked with me very closely, he was actually the one that really helped us to get to production. Lockley Evenson, who works at Microsoft now, and he was one that was really helping us with one of the big challenges we have. And I think that's actually what we were talking about is, what's the biggest challenge with Kubernetes in 2015? Well, it was the network. It was a pain because ingress was just, it was just a thought. There was primitives that were coming out, and we were solving it kind of with like an underlay network. But it was exciting to be able to be there at this time. There was just so much kind of like collaboration, people sharing things. It was so nascent, and yet you saw this kind of like this energy coming from the community of people helping each other, sharing, and really just like up-leveling each other at that time. And that kind of led to another landmark event which happened in that few months later in July, which was I sometimes call it like the pre-KubeCon, but it was the OSCON Kubernetes launch event. And at that event, it was interesting because that's when you really started to see like there was community. There was end users shipping things to production. And at that event, we finally saw the Cloud Native Compute Foundation form, and the intent was that we really want to make Kubernetes a community project. And so this was the beginning of that. And as you could tell, the stats show like there was 400 contributors. You could tell the energy was there, that you were starting to really delineate itself from a lot of other orchestration tooling. And as just the stats kind of show like what was happening, Kubernetes was now becoming the default. It was starting to separate itself from Swarm, from Mesosphere, even though those platforms were still had their communities around them. But you were seeing that people were really starting to embrace Kubernetes. And at that event, it's kind of funny because you got a chance to see like the first Kubernetes cluster. I mean, I've built things like that myself at times, but hey, sometimes you got to start from somewhere. I guess Google just kind of let them scrap together whatever they had. And I'm not going to lie, I'm on the release team. We actually were at risk. I think we were actually running still on machines under somebody's desk on how we built releases, which we finally are able to get out. Now we're able to do them in public cloud, not on somebody's desktop. And just to kind of show you, that's a really rough picture, but this was the event. This picture was really old. I'm sitting there right there on the right in that corner next to Lockie. Patrick from Kismatic was with us, but it was amazing. And that led up to that fall, to that next big event. One trivia note though I will say about this event, we were using a hashtag called KuberCon. Kubercon. So we always joke, so if there's a trivia contest and I use that as a trivia question, you guys will have that answer. But that led to... All right, we're good. So that led to that fall where Joseph Jacks, who worked at Kismatic, I remember he came to me and was like, hey, Joseph, we're going to do this conference around Kubernetes. And even though I was on board and I really thought, this is cool, it sounds interesting, I was skeptical. I was like, who's going to show up? We barely had like 150 at the OSCON event. Maybe we get 200. Little did I know what was going to happen. But it was cool because all of a sudden, you saw there was like almost 600 people there. There were people shipping to production that were like also doing it, and we were realizing that it was bigger than just someone on the West Coast or people in these cloud tech communities, that it was global now. It was starting to expand. It was a remarkable event. You kind of realize that things were really happening, and the stats at that time really kind of showed what was going on at that time. The trajectory was just going up. Now we doubled contributors. But there was still one thing that I noticed about the community that was still needed a little bit of work. It was kind of Kubernetes is a success, we get it. But there was one thing that still needed to be addressed. And that is related to just this graph here that Sarah Novotny posted. This was like in 2017 or 2018. But you could tell on the left, this project was still pretty much Google run. I think the red probably represents Red Hat and Clayton Coleman and all the work that he did, and maybe a few others, but all the governance, everything being done at that time was still in Google. We didn't have like the steering committees. We didn't have the technical operating committees. So there had to be a strategy of like, how do we make this thing truly a community project? Because we got the enthusiasm, we have the people. And how did it get from here to then just a couple years later, you notice like the change started to happen. So this was very strategic, and it was done by somebody that I think if you don't know her, you should. Sarah Novotny. She was the first community manager. She was the program manager around the open source project with Kubernetes. I have a lot of respect for her, just as I love Kelsey Hightower. Sarah Novotny, to me, is one of those people that were integral in making this truly a community project. And in this talk that she gave at KubeCon Austin in 2017, she looked back. She looked back at like what we did to make this kind of happen. And she kind of highlighted some of the core values of what they wanted the community to be. One thing she talked about is they wanted this project to no longer be in this shadowy kind of like, who's controlling it, who's making the decisions. She really wanted to make it where it was distributed, like it'd be out for the community, that we weren't just focused in one area and everything would happen there, but that we could make decisions asynchronously. She also talked about making it an environment where everybody felt welcome and inclusive, and that we would, everyone's heard and feels like they have a place in this community. She also talked about that it wasn't just revolved around one company, that it was actually the community was more important than the company. And I think there's a saying that if you're in a Kubernetes, in this Kubernetes upstream community, we always joke about like sometimes you could be, different company, same Slack. Like someone one day could be at Google, maybe IBM, they could be, Adobe, but it didn't matter because the work you did at the community was different. Like we were all aligned and we all shared this one same enthusiasm for this project. And then lastly, she kind of really highlighted about that we wanted to make it an area where we need to have succession. We need to teach people. We just can't, tell people this is what you should do. But that we should make it so that someone, maybe if you're new to it, and I even saw today, there's a talk at the end of the day where if you're new, you can go get some questions answered, and I love that. Because, there's a lot of people that are coming on this journey that were not there from the beginning. But then as well as like, we don't have that benevolent dictator for life. It's more of a collective where we have a steering committee that serves terms, we have a technical operating committee that serves certain terms, and we want to make sure that there is that ability for individuals to learn, and then they can step up as well, and that they can have their turn in being able to lead this project. And really, I think what she really wanted to emphasize and what was brought up at our contributor summit, a saying that I really love, and this is from the Python community, but Brett Cannon kind of said, I came for the language, but stayed for the community. And I think for myself, I came for this a long time ago, a lot has happened, but I've stayed for this community, and I love being able to be a part of it and hearing everyone's story, and I think that's what makes these events great. And so I think going forward as a community, there is some challenges that we have to acknowledge. Definitely in the open source ecosystem, there's headwinds. There's projects struggling with sustainability. I see the burnout and the fatigue with some of our contributors and maintainers, whether you're supported through work or not. It's challenging. And then as well as like we're seeing some of the effect on companies because of that ecosystem of, zero interest rates. So we're seeing companies relicense. So it's not easy right now to be in this open source space. And so I asked that question, what is this community going to be like in another 10 years? What is that story going to look like? And I know that question was kind of asked from a technical perspective at KubeCon Paris, where a lot of people responded, and obviously the obvious one is AI/ML, but who knows what's going to be in 5 years? Like, things are moving so fast. I think that's the one thing we can acknowledge, is that things are always going to change. It's always going to evolve. And so I think what's important is looking back at what Sarah was talking about, those values that she communicated out. I think those are the things that are always going to last. That community spirit that is, amplified through all of us and allowing us all to have a space. And so what I want to really leave you with is that the best way you could do this to shape what that next 10 years is going to look like is finding your space, being a part of it. Whether you attend an event like the Contributor Summit here, where you can actually be very active and very involved. Maybe it's just attending an event like KCD Romania and sharing your experience and just being open and just, allowing yourself to just kind of like share what you know, learn from others in the open, and just being comfortable in that manner. Like, those things really matter. Those things are what make these events really exciting. And sometimes it's just, make your voice heard. There's many ways you could do this, some people are comfortable in person. Others find that potentially that, hey, I can maybe do these on GitHub issues. There's other various ways that you can make your voice heard. It doesn't always have to be, directly on a stage. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that's very influential. And there is a direct really need for your voice and your help. We were looking at this event and we were doing contributor callouts, like looking for help, basically is what these are. And some of it just starts with like a SIG or a working group. And those are great ways to kind of find your way. And that's kind of how I got into SIG release. I was just kind of in there. I was just taking notes, and I liked doing it. And then I kind of was like, hey, there's some things here I could do for this group from a product perspective in my role. Why don't I contribute that as well? And you'll be surprised to find out that there's probably many roles that you can play. And lastly, there's more tactical things happening. This is a recent one that's coming up, the Zero to Merge. If you really want to hey, I really want to know what it's like to work in this Kubernetes community. I want to be able to, be, active, maintainer. I want to be able to work on a release. We have a program that is enabling people to be able to do just that. Spring cohort's going to be coming up. It's run by Taylor Dolezal. It's a great program. And so, there's a lot of things that we see happening in this community that's really positive. And I think if there's any real takeaway that I have is just, we all get to start some way, somehow. It always starts from humble beginnings. But I think just being present, showing up, I think that's what matters in this community. And I just really want to say, I want to thank you, KCD Romania. I think you're going to be very influential in the next 10 years. The story starts with you. So let's go. Thank you.